Will, do you have good RAM or do you have bad RAM?
Man, all I know is that RAM drama seems to be the most dramatic drama of any scene drama I've ever seen.
Do you know how hard I tried to combine RAM and drama into some kind of pithy, I don't know. It's not even
RAM drama rama.
I guess it's not really a portmanteau when drama literally contains RAM, right? Like that doesn't, you can't combine two things when one of them already exists inside the other. But you know what I mean? Like
drama rama,
drama, SD drama. No, see, nothing works.
You got to put Rama Lama Ding Dong in there, I think. What's going on with Mr. Ram, Brad? I'm really confused.
It's more like what went on with Mr. Ram, and it's over already at this point.
I missed it.
You missed the scene drama. That's scene drama comes and scene drama goes
so fast. It's so fleeting.
It is often fleeting. Yeah, you got to be there at the right time if you want front row seat. If you want to watch the sparks fly. I don't know. It's not really super worth getting into. There was some controversy in the Mr. scene about the quality of the RAM modules that are being built by hand and sold by a number of resellers.
Okay.
One of the popular Mr. developers was like, this RAM sucks. Make a better RAM. That's why my cores are crashing on it. And then other developers behind the project were like, no, you're just not using the RAM right. And it turned into a big controversy where, like, for a hot weekend or something, maybe a week or so, everybody was freaking out, going like, did I get bad RAM? Like, is my RAM shitty? But it seems like through software they have pretty much addressed the problems and everything's fine now. But there is a new RAM tester app out there, so even though it seems like they have gotten it stable on basically everybody's RAM, as far as I can tell, you can still go get that RAM tester and technically find out if you have the bad RAM or not.
Huh. So I actually have 2 sticks of RAM because shipping from Portugal was incredibly slow at the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, it was.
And I needed to buy something else. So I just was like, you know what? I'll chuck an extra $50 in at Mr. Add-ons. And then that package came like 2 days later.
And then when did the Portuguese RAM come?
3 days after the Mr. Add-ons package arrived. It wasn't my best moment.
That is perhaps a bit foolhardy, but look, hey, now you've got double the RAM just in case.
Yeah,
I'm talking way out of my depth here. There have been suggestions that certain situations may end up requiring 2 different RAM kits installed at the same time, which
I'm ready to go.
That's
Put me in, coach.
That's months old information that may not actually come to pass, but
that was about PlayStation Core or something, right?
That was the talk, which that thing is progressing, by the way.
Yeah, they can post it in the whole thing now, right?
The developer of the PlayStation Core posted footage over the holidays of, I believe, booting the BIOS and like booting an application, basically software. You know, like they took the BIOS and booted it and then ran an application on it.
I'm pretty stoked about that. I never had a PlayStation.
What?
Yeah, no, I that was right around the time that I was in college and was flat ass broke.
Yeah,
and
that'll happen.
Like by the time I had money to spend on a PlayStation, it would have been a foolish purchase in terms of like the PlayStation 2 being on the cusp of coming out. And yeah, so I never had a PlayStation.
Well, especially in that case, the PS2 just ran the PS1 games anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, the stuff's exciting, but maybe go get the RAM tester and run it for 30 minutes and see if it turns red or not, or if it stays green. There is no drama in your Rama.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. What's up?
Hey, man.
Hi.
It's been 4 weeks since I looked at emails. Something, the emails.
It's been 4 weeks and 16 days. Oh, wow. We were going to very different pop music representations of the phrase. It's been X amount of time.
Look, the other option for me was this is the summer of our discontent. So
I was going to Prince, and you were going to something unmentionable.
Look, we don't need to talk about my brief and deep love of the Bare Naked Ladies in the early 2000s.
I am teetering on the brink of that song getting stuck in my head for the rest of this episode, so we have to move on.
I'm sorry. Okay. Look, just think about Train instead. That'll fix it for you.
How about we think about emails?
Emails are great. I love emails.
Emails.
If you have a question for us, Brad and Will, who make a tech pod, you can send it to techpod@content.town. And we will answer them. The question we have is should it be every 4 weeks or should it be at the end of the month?
Yeah, we have really gotten off of our schedule here. This was supposed to be an every kind of last week of the month type show.
That was the initial plan.
And we figured hey, if we just do it every 4 weeks, that'll line up with the end of the month every time, right? No, it did not.
Stupid calendar doesn't work that way, it turns out. But anyway,
here we are.
Send your emails to techpod@content.town. It's the number one address on the internet for technology emails.
It's the number one email address for getting your email read on this podcast.
It is the exclusive way. You can send them to Patreon comments and they might get noticed and remembered. We look at all of those. But yeah,
you could ask your question on the Discord. I might make it on here, but
there's no chance I'm going to remember how to find a question from the Discord. But anyway, what's our first email, Brad?
I mean, we've got this Gmail tasks workflow figured out now. So
it's a good workflow.
Emails are now the most efficient possible way to do this.
Yeah.
All right. First email in the Jan 21 emails task that I created.
I like that you put the apostrophe before 21 too in the appropriate place.
That's right. I like to keep it professional.
AP style.
This email is from Harith. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, from Toronto. This has to be a follow-up on the last email episode we did, which feels like it might have been 6 months ago at this point.
It was at least one failed insurrection ago.
So I don't really remember what this is in reference to because he doesn't specify. But he does say, just following up on some things for Brad, killedbygoogle.com. I think, that was probably when we were talking about tasks last time, right?
We talked about using Google products in important workflows because they have a tendency to kill low, from reader on. I think we talked about Stadia, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe, yes. But I mean, yes, obviously Google has a probably well-earned reputation for killing off various products of theirs, right? But I knew the site existed, and I guess I couldn't remember the address, and that's probably why he sent this in. But it is killedbygoogle.com. And A, holy crap, there are a lot of these. B, I really love that some of these have a headstone next to them, and some of them have a guillotine next to them.
Wow.
I'm really not sure what the distinction is there.
Brad, there are 223 things. I mean, some of these are like app frameworks and stuff like that.
I'm hovering over the guillotine, and there is no alt text popping up, so I'm not quite sure what they're trying to imply with that. What do you think? Versus the headstone? Got any ideas?
Yeah, I'm curious.
What died of natural causes and what was executed by Google?
App Maker was a tool that allowed its users to build and deploy custom businesses easily and securely on the web without writing much code. It will be about 4 years old. It was killed in 2 days. I don't understand.
That's impressive.
Oh, it's going away. So here it is. The guillotine are ones that are on the chopping block.
Yes. Okay.
And the
yes, you're right.
Tombstones are ones that are already dead,
already in the ground.
Yeah,
already in the Google graveyard.
Yeah.
What do we got here? Android Things. I have heard people complaining that that's going away. Science Journal, Hire by Google, Focals by North. What? Pigeon Transit? That is less. Okay. Pigeon Transit is less interesting than it sounds.
I mean, I thought they were sending data on like little tiny flash drives strapped to pigeons.
That was my hope, but
remember, there's an RFC for that.
Actually, apparently, Pigeon Transit was a transit app that tracked, among other things, escalator outages.
Have you ever been on an escalator when it broke?
No.
I was on one at CES one year, and like CS escalators, there are people on every step, and you just stand there and ride.
Yeah.
And it stopped. It like juddered to a halt, and everybody like slammed into each other.
Ooh.
And I couldn't help myself because it was right after that Saturday Night Live skit. But I yelled, "Oh my God, the humanity!" really loud.
Yeah,
because I'm a dumbass.
Oh boy,
and got a pretty good laugh from the CS crowd.
I mean, I have heard some genuinely horrific things about escalator accidents, so maybe we should just move on from there.
Yeah. Anyway,
Touring Bird, another avian Google product here.
I'm
an Area 120 incubator project, which helped. Okay, I don't need to read all these. Most of these are. Oh man, YouTube for Nintendo 3DS.
Rip.
That's sad.
I think that's probably okay. Like some of these are okay.
What's at the very bottom of this list?
Like
Rightly.
Oh, I remember Rightly.
Hello.
Rightly was a web-based. Rightly became Google Docs. It became the word processor in Google Docs.
Oh. Okay.
Google Desk Bar. Remember that? You could put that on the toolbar and type shit into Google, and it would just pop up a browser with the answer.
Grand Central. That sounds familiar.
Grand Central was was what became Google Voice.
Okay.
They bought it. Google Browser Sync was a Firefox plugin that let you sync your Firefox settings across. I used that.
Yeah, to be fair, some of these evolved into better products that still exist. This was not.
Yeah. Dodgeball. Everybody's favorite social network.
Oh, I remember Google Talk. Okay. All right. Enough of this.
Yeah. Have you noticed that more people are using Stadia lately?
No.
I'm seeing friends like talk about using Stadia to play, let's say large live service games that maybe you don't want to have 180 gigs of worth installed on your computer necessarily.
Hey, they removed like a third of the content in that game, and now it's much smaller.
Oh, okay, perfect.
In case you haven't heard, that was like kind of a big story out of CES is that LG is adding Stadia to all of their TVs this year.
Yeah.
Well, all of this year's TVs, I should say, not all their TVs. I believe it's the 2020 models will get Stadia in a software update, and then the 2021 models I may ship with it or also get an update. But the older sucks. TVs will not get it, is what I'm saying.
They've been paying streamers to play games on Stadia lately, I've noticed.
Huh.
Like there's something like I think they might be trying to make it happen. I don't know.
Hang on. Are those streamers capturing the Stadia feed locally and streaming it back out, or is there some provision where they can just stream it straight out of the data center? Because the data center has
it locally because their like heads pop up on top of it and stuff.
Well, yeah, but I would think you could still. They could figure that out, right? You could send
your overlays, dog.
Send your webcam feed and to the data center, and they could sync it up somehow. I don't know.
Hey, shout out to XX69 Big Dog 420XX for the follow.
Yeah.
You're new here, Matt. Slam that follow button.
Yeah. Harith, again, I hope I'm getting your name right. Also, boy, did I take some shit over this on the Discord and elsewhere over my pronunciation of Toke.
As someone...
Which apparently is, in fact, Took.
As someone who has never pronounced anything incorrectly in his life, I'm going to say...
Yes, the authority.
There's nothing wrong with mispronouncing words that you've learned from reading.
Yeah.
But haven't heard.
Especially when they're French.
Yeah, get people's names right, though.
Took, like the Hobbit, he says, is how you say that.
Is that Took or Took?
Took. In the movie, they pronounce it Took. I don't know.
Huh.
How?
Wow.
I don't know how the good professor would have actually pronounced it, but
I'm just going to keep calling it a beanie. Toboggan?
Did you know that none of the names in Lord of the Rings are actually the names of those characters?
Wait, what?
Are you familiar with the whole conceit behind the Lord of the Rings?
It's a metaphor for the rise of fascism in Europe in World War II.
No, dude, Tolkien hated allegory. Like, he fucking despised it. He very strongly came out and said no.
Okay,
to that assertion.
Metaphor for racism?
I'm talking about the meta-narrative conceit, which is that, God, I can't even keep this straight myself.
I'm just going to get the correction ready for next week.
I've read about this more times than I would like to admit. So The Lord of the Rings is, in the meta-narrative, is a translation of a book called The Red Book of Westmarch, which was translated by Tolkien from the original Western, I believe, is the language that it is supposedly actually written in. So the book you are reading is like an Englishman translating this long-lost tome in this mythical language. And all the names, such as Frodo Baggins, are actually like sort of Anglicizations of the original Western names. So like, I'm just going to, what is this podcast even about? I'm going to go to Google and type Frodo Baggins' real name and see. I don't even know how to pronounce this exactly. I don't know what the pronunciation is in Western.
Well, we don't have the right phonemes, it turns out.
Maura Labingi is my stab.
That's a pretty good Hobbit name. I gotta say, that's better than Frodo Baggins.
That's my stab at how to pronounce Frodo's actual real name, as it would have been pronounced in the era appropriate Middle Earth.
Here's Brad. Here's my contribution to this.
What is Sam's real name?
When I play PUBG, there's a squad of people that we run into occasionally in games whose names are all variants on Baggins, but they're obscene riffs on Frodo and Bilbo Baggins.
Let's maybe.
It's pretty good. I'm not gonna say what the names are, but they're pretty funny.
Let's stay away.
They're not like offensive. They're just rude. Anyway,
well, shit. We got to close the loop on this now that we've come this far. What is Pippin's actual name in Western? I've got to figure this out.
I want to know what Tom Bombadil's name is.
Bombadil.
Tom Bombadil.
Razanar Took.
Wow.
Apparently is his real name.
Took is the same though. That's
was
nice.
the Western name of. Okay, we have to move on.
This is a death spiral. We could do this for hours.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well,
you know that Gandalf the Brown's name isn't really, or Gandalf the Grey's name isn't really Gandalf the Grey.
Yeah, it's Olorin.
Well, in Mithrandir, he has a bunch of different. He has different names based on where he is.
Excuse me, Mithrandir is, I believe, the Sindarin, or is it the Quenya name for the physical manifestation of Gandalf in Middle Earth? Olorin is, or however you say it, is his like actual angelic name. Like
our next question comes from Brian.
When he was actually born in heaven, when he was created by Iluvatar in the magical song, the Ainulindale.
Having never engaged with anything beyond The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings books, I'm very happy about my choices right now.
It's actually really interesting. Like I totally get that like a lot of video game lore is incredibly tedious, but like if you walk all the way back to the era that Tolkien was writing in, like a lot of it is so derived from his like really devout Catholicism and stuff that there's actually like a real world theological element to a lot of it.
So you're saying there are reasons for lore?
Yes. Religious lore reasons.
Somebody should do a podcast.
Yeah, I'm just whatever. I mean, there's like some legit scholarship there is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I don't doubt that.
But it's not a bunch of dime store fantasy pulp garbage is what I'm trying to say. But anyway.
No, that all derived from that. It's a third tier derivation instead of a second tier.
I was so busy rambling about this stuff that I accidentally closed the Gmail window. Okay, I've got it. Okay, thank God. We are
off the rails.
19 minutes in, and we have only answered one email. I'm going to click the check mark next to that email.
Woo-hoo.
Read the next one from Brian.
It's a pretty good animation when you click the check mark, just for the record.
Wait, can you see that in real time?
Little star. Yeah, it was cool.
Oh, that's cool. Okay. Brian asks, recently I've had an issue with my ISP and streaming to Twitch. I typically get speeds of about 900 megabit per second down and 35 up. And I have a fairly high-end DOCSIS 3.1 modem and a newish ASUS router, excuse me. I've had zero issues for months, and randomly last week, I am unable to keep a stable bit rate from OBS to Twitch. After tinkering, I'm led to believe that my ISP has somehow flagged Twitch on my connection and throttled it. My ISP says they don't throttle speeds, but I'm beginning to suspect that they do at a certain point for certain services. I am also not exceeding my data cap with them. My question is, since both of you are very active on Twitch and likely burn through a ton of data each month, what do you guys do, if anything, with your ISP or network to ensure that you are able to reliably stream several times a week without your ISP giving you the middle finger?
So there's a bunch of things happening here. One is that streaming to Twitch, the max you can stream to Twitch is like 6 megabits per second. Which,
yeah, if you're partnered, it's 8, but yes, if you're not, it's 6.
Oh, I can't. It complains at me if I do more than 6 and I'm a partner.
Really? Like it actually complains?
Yeah, in the control panel, it pops up a red flag that says, "Hey, you're exceeding the maximum bit rate."
That's weird. So I haven't tried it in a few months, but like the Giant Bomb channel on Twitch is partnered, and I've tried pushing the bit rate past 8 to see what it would do.
Oh, you can,
and it took it. But the weird thing is, it dropped the resolution. I was streaming, yeah. I was like, let's try like 1080 at 12. I think I tried. And it did take it and rebroadcast it, but 720 was the max resolution it was outputting. which is weird. Anyway.
So yeah, like if you're running 6 megabits per second, you're generating what? It's like 6 times 60 times 60 divided by 8 is like 2 gigs. That's not right. Yeah, it's like 2 gigs an hour, 2.5 gigs an hour or something like that.
Yeah.
Or 2.7 gigs an hour. You're going to have a hard time hitting your caps with that unless you're doing a lot of streaming.
Well, so hang on. I have a somewhat ignorant question, and forgive me.
Yes.
I know I sound like an asshole by saying this, but I don't have any data caps to deal with, so I genuinely don't know how this works. But does Upstream, under most ISP policies, actually contribute to your cap?
So
I always assumed it was just download.
So one of the problems with data caps in general is that they're policed poorly and they're measured inconsistently. So like your router, if it tracks data caps, will sometimes report different things than your ISP's control panel and stuff like that, because they're measuring on their router end and you're measuring on your router end probably.
And there might be like some services that are exempt under different policies and stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. So for example, like with Comcast, if you're using Comcast IPTV stuff, all of that data is supposed to be exempt. All of the streaming data from like here's a wonderful thing. If you watch HBO from your Comcast app on HBO on a Comcast connection, that data doesn't count. If you watch HBO Now from the HBO Now app, that data does count. So it puts you in a like the TLDR here is that data caps are jacked. It's a stupid way to measure. It's not like you're buying a finite resource.
They should not exist.
Should not exist. Most ISPs have a clause, including our good ISPs. Like your ISP probably has a clause that says you can't run a server on your gigabit fiber at home. Generally, they don't care if it's small and low traffic. Like my AT&T fiber explicitly says don't run servers.
They say that? Okay.
Yes.
My ISP is pretty laid back.
Your ISP rocks. I love your ISP. I wish I could get your ISP here.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
But running Twitch streams is not running a server. You're not delivering bits from your machine to all the other people watching your Twitch stream. You're sending bits to a Twitch server that then repeats those bits out and transcodes them on the fly to bazillions of other people around the world. So that shouldn't get. Looking at the date, this email was sent at the end of December. Twitch had some problems toward the middle to end of December last year. So my guess is probably that's what you had. Often if they have transcoding problems, if they're getting DDoS or something like that, they sacrifice everything to keep the partners and then the affiliate streams running, which is shitty. And when they are under heavy load, then you get less transcodes. You get fewer transcodes, resources put on free and even affiliate accounts. And that causes what seems like frame drops and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The other thing that can cause frame drops is if your CPU or GPU are spiked on whatever you're streaming. So if you're playing a game that's really, really CPU bound, like a good example is Cyberpunk, it can cause drop frames on your OBS end. OBS will tell you. OBS tells you whether you're getting network lag or CPU or GPU latency.
Yeah, let me fire up OBS real quick here. It's been so long since I set this up. I can't remember if this is on by default. I don't think it is, but the stats panel in OBS is very useful. Do you use that thing?
Yeah, So I have it set up so it gives me like pops an error, and when it does, I can click a button and it shows me the stats panel. I usually don't leave it up on the day-to-day streams because I do PC streams, so it's
right.
Like I'm not doing the heavy math on the gaming computer.
Yeah, I'm all on one machine, so I really have to eyeball that stuff to make sure it's okay. But you can dock it permanently in the OBS window if you want, or just pop it up. But yeah, that thing will tell you. I'm sitting here and look at it like CPU usage. How much time left until your disk is full from archiving the stream, average time to render frames missed due to rendering lag, skipped frames due to encoding lag. Like, you can tell in a pretty granular way how your stream is performing.
The other one that's really useful is on the Twitch creator dashboard, which is at dashboard.twitch.tv. You can now add a stream health panel that shows you a graphical representation of the bitrate that Twitch is getting, your frame rate, and you can click into the inspector link and get like frame by frame analysis basically of what's going on.
I love analytics.
It's really fun.
I love analytics.
Useful and good.
I love that like YouTube, and I want to say maybe some others, like even the embedded apps on a lot of devices will have the like this is a shitty way to phrase it, but YouTube I think calls it like stats for nerds or something like that. But like I'm amazed that they expose that information on like a Roku, for example, or
well, it turns out it's like really important console for troubleshooting.
Yeah,
having that stuff that makes it much easier. Like the hard part of a lot of this stuff, and I don't have a good solution for this. I'd be curious if anybody in the audience does. But when you're streaming to Twitch, it's really hard to tell sometimes when stuff is on your end and when stuff is on their end.
Yeah. Also, the other thing I was going to mention is he's talking in DOCSIS terms, so that means he's on cable.
Yeah,
which is subject to its own kind of weird variables, right? Like kind of neighborhood load, I think will affect that and stuff like that, right?
Well, so upstream, there should be plenty of bandwidth upstream. The thing that I will say is that if you have somebody in the house that's doing something else that is upstream heavy, and like a Zoom doesn't necessarily count, but there are. I'm trying to remember. Gina used to do something. Gina used to do something that would cause frame drops on my Twitch stream when she was doing it on her computer. It might have been like Google Photos Sync, because that'll use pretty much all the upstream that you have if you have 4K videos and stuff in your camera roll.
Yeah.
And 35 megabits per second is a lot for like normal web browsing. It is not a ton for blasting video to the internet, especially at 1080p 60.
Yeah. Short answer, there's a lot of things that could be going wrong.
Yeah. My guess is usually in my experience, when Twitch is being janky, it's on Twitch's end.
Yeah. All right. Next email here. Stuart from British Columbia. Why is Toslink keyed? It only plugs in one way, and there doesn't appear to be any reason for that to be the case.
There is absolutely no reason for that to be the case, because it's just a fiber that has light coming through it. There's no. So I did some research on this.
I feel like before we get into that, I feel like we should say what Toslink is, because it's so old at this point. I feel like a lot of people might not know. It's optical. It's optical audio. It's like it's the thing from before HDMI that people used to transmit digital audio in home theaters.
And specifically, Toslink is the physical form factor for an optical audio cable that transmits SPDIF data.
I was about to ask. I would literally have got a page that I just pulled up in front of me called SPDIF versus Toslink, because I was curious. So SPDIF is a standard and Toslink is the physical connection. Is that right?
Yeah. And you can get, so Toslink was, I think, owned by Philips and Sony.
So yeah, I was going to say, I just looked that up like a month ago for some weird reason. Isn't that what SPDIF actually means? Like, yes, Sony Philips digital interface.
Yeah, and it was a way to get the actual digital bits off of high-end CD players. The weird thing is Toshiba, I think, owns Toslink, because I think the T in TOS is for Toshiba.
Okay.
And so they had to license that. As a result, you can also do SPDIF over RCA analog copper wires as well.
Wondered about that, because a lot of subwoofers will do 5.1 that way over what looks like just an RCA cable. Interesting.
Yeah, it's just a normal ass RCA cable. It's a fairly low bit rate. It's probably, my guess is it's probably Redbook bit rate.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. So it's like a few hundred kilobits per second, probably.
Yeah. I don't know what the numbers are, but I just became aware of this recently that.
Per channel. Sorry. Per channel.
Okay. That optical is like actually obsolete as a standard. It's not like you can't use optical and get the same quality you can with HDMI. Like it actually is pretty limited in bandwidth. Yeah. So like it can't carry uncompressed 5.1, for example.
Yeah, and you can't do seven more than 5.1 channels. Like you're limited to Dolby Digital or DTS. Yes,
like the old compressed Dolby Digital, like the kind of inferior.
The true HD stuff, the 24-bit stuff doesn't work.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I was
just going to say, so the thing is, you can get unkeyed round Toslink cables that lock into place. They've been on the market for a few years.
They're just kind of plug in anyway.
Well, there's Mini Toslink, which is a format that was on the only place I've ever seen it was on old MP3 players and old Sound Blaster cards. If you had a Sound Blaster that had an optical out or an optical in, it didn't use the Toslink plug. It used a Mini Toslink, which was basically just a round plug with a light duber on the end that you jammed into the 3.5 mil plug on the back of a sound card. There's also full-size Toslink now that are round and still lock into place.
Interesting.
But the speculation I read is there was a duplex standard that uses the same connector as Toslink, but it's like double wide and has 2 prongs and is keyed so that the left channel always goes in the left side and the right channel always goes in the right side. And the assumption is that when the Toslink standard was made, they just said, oh, let's just use this thing that we can already get off the shelf and get the single channel variant of it that is keyed.
I see.
Even though they didn't need a keyed plug for Toslink. But there's that's speculation. I don't know that that's true.
I was just looking up. I'm kind of surprised that this is still in use for how old it is, but like even like the current LG OLEDs, which is kind of like the top of the line TV you can get right now, like they still have optical out on them.
Or like an audio return to a receiver or something?
Yeah, like if you, instead of using the ARC HDMI port.
Do new TVs still have component inputs? I assume they
I highly doubt it. I don't think, I was looking at that rear panel on that 2020 OLED, and I believe it did not. I think it just had HDMI.
Man, that's a bummer for old consoles.
Yeah.
Kind of.
That's why I like the Mister, not to harp on the Mister, but like the lack of having to deal with old ass cables and analog signals that you need to convert and stuff like that is like, that's one of the biggest draws to that project for me, is just like it kind of solves the video problem.
Well, so what if you don't have component inputs, does that mean it means you lose like original Xbox, GameCube, and PS2 era?
Oh, you mean like what is the newest console that you can't use on a modern TV? Let's see. 360 and PS3 definitely had HDMI. The Wii did not.
No, but you can play Wii games on a Wii U, which does.
Yes, that's true. I'm trying to think.
So an Xbox 360 launch didn't have HDMI. It was component only at launch.
Yes, that
it
was
was like the Rev A or whatever.
It was like a big deal when they came out with the 360 that had HDMI on it. That feels like,
yeah, it was 100 years ago. That was when we were in the Sausalito office.
Yes, I mean, I was literally at GameSpot in my first job at that point. Anyway,
yeah,
I'm glad that they still have the optical out on TVs, because I might end up using it when I get a new TV.
Yeah, it feels weird to use an HDMI cable for an audio return, even though that's probably the right thing to do. Some TVs also and soundbars also use USB, is my understanding.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have much experience personally with ARC and eARC, which is the newer variant, but I feel like I see a whole lot of complaining about those standards not working very well.
Well, so it's funny. I want to do an HDMI episode in the next month or so, but I don't have one of the new TVs. Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's important though, because people have questions and it's really fucking confusing.
Right. You're totally right.
Maybe I'll see if Robert Heron or somebody who has expertise in that area will pop on the show with us and answer questions. Yeah, since we don't have a lot of firsthand experience.
I mean, another reason to not use ARC if you don't have to is that eats up one of your HDMI ports on your TV.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But anyway, okay, there we go. Question from Matthew: what do all the numbers mean? 50, 70? Is that the graphics card or the processor? I missed
I thought this was an our numbers real question.
Oh no. I missed a paradigm shift at some point after Intel switched from x86 to Pentium. How do I tell how powerful the processor is? How fast? What about AMD? I'm lost. Can you guys help? I have always found the numbering, the naming schemes on processors and graphics cards to be like, I started to use the word arbitrary, which I guess is maybe a little harsh, because I'm sure somewhere in the marketing department they feel like they have like a good logical reason for the way they name things, but it's pretty tough to keep up with.
So when I was at Maximum PC, I asked the Intel people and the NVIDIA people at different times about how they did because remember Intel rolled out after the Pentium 4, they rolled out the Core name with, I think, Nehalem. I can't remember. One of the early.
I believe that's right.
Nehalem was second gen Core, I think.
Yeah.
They had something in before that was like a bad dual core with separate packages that they had to talk across PCI Express bus or what. Anyway.
Larrabee? No,
Larrabee's different. Larrabee's the graphics card thing.
Oh, right. Yeah. I totally yeah.
Well, so NVIDIA straight up said, we really like German cars, so we wanted to have a naming scheme that was reminiscent of German cars, where like the first number told you what series it was, and the second number told you how fast it was within that series, and the third numbers didn't mean anything.
You know what? I actually respect this answer way more than what I thought was the case, which is that it was just made up.
Yeah, because like they basically looked at how BMW and Mercedes and I think Audi named their cars,
sure,
and are like, okay, yeah, the 6 series, so 3000 means it's this year,
yeah,
right, and 80 means it's the mid-range, 70 means it's the low mid-range, 60 means it's slower than that, and 90 means it's super duper fast. And if there's a 5 after that, means it's fast, a little bit faster or a little bit different than the next one.
Okay.
Intel, I have to always look up CPUs because CPUs are crazy and batshit, and there's so many more SKUs in like where NVIDIA has 4 or 5 consumer graphics cards at any point, and AMD has 4 or 5 consumer graphics cards. There's usually like 75 Intel CPUs at any moment available.
Yeah. I mean, they do use a. Well, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna say they do have an overarching scheme, though.
Yeah, it's kind of a 4-tiered system that they've been on for a while. You know, they've got the i3, 5, 7, and 9.
Yeah.
Which kind of roughly maps to the NVIDIA stuff you just rattled off. It's kind of entry level, like mid range, good enough. 7, the i7 was kind of the top of the line for a while. I want to say the i9 came along later.
Well, so for a long time, the 3, the 5, the 7, the 9 is relatively recent, and it replaces what were like consumer Xeons before, I think.
Okay, sure, yeah.
It used to mean that like I think 3 and 5 didn't have hyperthreading. 3 would have really small caches compared to 5. And 7 was kind of the enthusiast place point. And then the numbers would mean increasing speeds within those ranges. But sometimes you'd get like sometimes you would get a K or an X, which meant that they were unlocked for overclocking or were tested for overclocking. I don't know that any of that stuff is true anymore. It seems completely arbitrary now.
Yeah.
I know that the 3 is definitely like it also used to be that they had a different product line name for the low end product. So like Celeron in the 90s was the low end product, and it was limited cache and all sorts of other stuff. And then when you got into the Pentium, that was the premium line, and that all changed when they launched the core products as well. Because for a while you could still buy Pentiums that were like these not really particularly multitasking friendly CPUs, but were real low power.
Did they stop doing that? I thought you could still get modern Pentiums that were kind of still that.
I don't believe that they still sell modern Pentiums, but I'm not like I said, it's confusing and arbitrary. They have a really good site is the good news.
Arc.intel.com is
with a K.
Yes, ark.intel.com is a very information rich database of basically every Intel chip ever made.
And then the AMD has a similar site. It's called the Product Resource Center, which is amd.com/en/products/specifications.
A little bit less intuitive.
It's not as good a URL.
Also, their naming scheme is pretty similar, right? Like they've got the Ryzen 5, the Ryzen 7, Ryzen 9.
I think AMD, because they have a simpler product line, especially right now, is way more intelligible. Yeah,
sure.
And I believe they do the X's to indicate that they're like unlocked overclocking friendly processors as well.
Yeah. They just announced, not to get off on a tangent, they just announced lower TDP versions of those new Ryzens.
Is that the X ones?
So I want to say they are not X. I could be wrong. But so there's like a 65 watt version of the 5900 coming out. But apparently you can only get them in pre-built machines.
That makes sense.
Which is a real bummer because that sounds like an incredible chip to run a NAS or server with. I mean,
that's also kind of the only place you can get the new AMD CPUs right now.
Do you think those are clocked down? Like because the original, the 5900X, the TDP is like 105, I think.
They could be respins. They could be chips from the center of the core of the center of the dies that are more efficient. There's all sorts like if they're binning the chips, like sometimes like toward the edges of the die, you have to put more power into them to get them to run, which means you generate more heat at the same clock speeds. So it could just be like center of die versus edge of die, and they're differentiating those products more.
I would think those would be more valuable though, not the ones that you would put into just kind of pre-built.
Well, pre-built. When you say in this case, pre-built means like Origin and Falcon Northwest and stuff like that.
Sure.
Alienware, Dell, whatever.
So maybe you are going to pay a premium for those.
I would. I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't for consumers, sorry, I'm making weird mouth noises. For consumers at that price range, it probably doesn't matter the difference between one and the other, unless you're planning to do some really crazy overclocking. Would be my,
I guess
my uninformed read on that situation.
What if you were going to run like a NAS that was going to stay on 24/7? That lower TDP would be pretty nice.
Anyway. That's interesting. I think I just rearranged emails by accident by idly clicking.
All right. Well, whatever. I'm just going to read the next one.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Question from Brian, a different Brian this time.
Brian 2.
Recently, my blue snowball broke. You were talking about them last week, and I thought I could ask you, and you may know the answer. The USB input on the back of the mic is what broke. The small plastic square that keeps the 4 metal prongs apart seems to have fallen out. Have you ever fixed something like this? And is it even possible? Have you ever replaced that type of port? Is it worth it to do? I can't really afford to buy a new one right now, so I thought you might have the answers. I think, didn't you explicitly say that's what breaks on the snowball?
This is the number one thing. I've had 3 blue snowballs, and this is broken on 2 of them, and the third one I gave away before it broke. So,
so ticking time bomb. Is forgive me, is the snowball the little round kind of orb looking thing on a stand? Okay.
Here, the TLDR on the snowball is it is basically the best $50 microphone you can buy
until it breaks.
There are a buttload of tutorials on YouTube about how to fix this. The thing I will say is, if you are good at soldering, it's probably pretty easy to fix. You may be even able to put like a rubber band around the cable and hold it in place so it's touching the contacts right. I am not. Soldering this kind of connector is hard. You can probably get a replacement connector for under $5. And if you're really bold, you might be able to solder the wires directly on. It's only 4 points. I don't know that I would recommend doing that because if you mess it up, you'll torch the USB bus on your computer. But yeah, there's like I Googled this and found 4 microphones repair videos, including one with a guy that is doing a PIP, seemingly recording it from inside his car. Like I'm not going to endorse any of these. Absolutely, if it doesn't work, try to fix it. Or that, like, if my feeling on fixing things that are fundamentally broken and don't work is go for it. Worst case, you'll learn something and it still won't work.
Give it a shot.
You're not going to make it worse.
Yeah.
If you're going to desolder it, it's like, and you don't have a decent soldering iron, maybe find a friend who you can borrow one from for a couple of days who has a temperature controlled soldering iron. Yeah. Because when you're desoldering stuff, it's much easier to do it if you can basically get the tip of your soldering iron right at the temperature. Like you want the soldering iron exactly at the temperature that's going to melt the solder without going any hotter.
This sounds like kind of a lot for my first soldering project, though. Like, if that's the boat you're in, I'd say it's maybe time for a new microphone.
So looking at how this thing comes apart, the good news is it's the big A female USB connector.
Yeah.
So it's not one of the micros or minis or C's, which are almost impossible for somebody who isn't really good at soldering to fix.
Yeah.
So you might be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're down to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, this might be a good learning opportunity.
Yeah, and if you have one of these microphones and you're worried about breaking it, the problem is putting stress on that USB port where it goes in and out, it wiggles and it breaks it over time. So if you put it on a shock mount or something like that and support that cable so the cable doesn't move when the microphone moves, you're totally fine. You can get like a $25 desk clamp shock mount for your microphone. It'll make the microphone sound better because it means when you bang on your table, that sound isn't transmitted to the mic. And you can get the microphone at the right distance from your face, no matter where you sit on your desk, versus the little 20-cent stand that they ship with that thing. So, yeah. And the added benefit is it'll protect the USB cable connection so it doesn't break on the back of the mic.
That's right. All right.
Let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
Brian.
I have not fixed. He did ask if we have fixed similar things to that. I mean, the most complicated thing I've ever repaired via soldering was like some speaker wire. So no. I've never tried something that difficult.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I've soldered switches onto keyboards before. I desoldered the switches on my Logitech mouse a few weeks ago, which was the hardest soldering job I've ever done.
Right.
But
yeah,
I
think we
We talked about it.
Yeah.
It was intense.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Speaking of
a couple of people have said they've done the same thing though.
Oh.
So yeah.
Email from Steven. He's 21. He is a May graduate, he says, and he says he has a job lined up coming out of school. However, my wife and many of my friends in my graduating class have not been so lucky, as many firms in this state are in a hiring freeze or downsizing due to COVID, etc. Many of these new graduates are taking up side hustles, whether it be in YouTube, Twitch, game development, or Etsy and Shopify, etc. My question is this. As two who have made careers doing precisely the cool crap I am into, where would you start if you were around this age with similar economic resources to a newly employed graduate? I think it would be cool to learn a little bit more about how you two got started and maybe where you think the opportunities are for hobbyists in 2021 to make something of their work. Personally, I have been working on a low poly mobile game in Unity in my free time.
That is a cool thing to do.
That is cool. I wish I had a better answer for this, but like I assume I can speak for both of us here when I say that we got started at a time when there were like 0.001% as many people trying to do stuff like this. Like
both watching and doing. Yeah.
It is so crowded out there. Like I sympathize with anybody trying to like get noticed in. Like, you know, social media is just complete, especially at this time with the economy and COVID being what they are.
I mean,
like people trying to promote, you know, side projects of theirs. Like nothing comes to mind as advice right off the top of the head for how to get noticed.
Even here's the thing. If you want to do stuff like this, the number one thing is don't avoid debt as much as you can. Avoid credit card debt, school debt, whatever you can, because having debt limits your ability to do work for practically nothing for the time it takes to get the stuff going. Even with established audiences, you know, I've been streaming on Twitch for like 5 years. They sent the year in review thing the other day. They're like, hey, you streamed for 1,200 hours. I was like, wow, that is 3/4 of a full-time job. And if I looked at, I was doing tax stuff at the exact same time. I was like, oh, wow, I should have, if I was doing this to make money, I would have been much better off driving an Uber or fucking delivering pizzas or literally anything else.
Hey, that's rough.
On like a dollars per hour basis.
Yeah.
So, you know, that is, you're not going to make money doing this stuff for a long time. And that's starting with a 15-year audience behind me of people who aren't necessarily into the thing that I do on Twitch, but enough of them are that like there's a couple hundred people watching me play games at night.
Sure.
It's also not my full-time job. So, you know, maybe different if you come out and say, hey, this is what I'm doing for a living. But it is, the secret is to do it as a hobby and be in a position where you don't need that to make money to pay your bills. And then you're able to take you're able to take chances.
Yeah.
I talked to a friend of mine who is a big time streamer now a few months ago. And when we were talking about this, I was like, how did you decide you were going to do this for a living? He was like, well, you know, I was working this job and I was like, I want to take 3 months off of I want to take a sabbatical from my job over the summer. And he was like, I'm going to try streaming Twitch for that 3 months and see how it goes. And he got on and just busted ass and did 10, 12 hours a day for 3 months, and also was really good at the game he was playing. So in that time he was able to build enough of an audience that he didn't have to go back to the real air quote real job.
Man, that's impressive in 3 months.
At the end of that 3 months. But also he's like, he was a competitive CS player.
Okay, well
that was younger and stuff like that.
You're in a rare category if you're that type of person. Like they're competitive gamers do very well on Twitch just because, you know, they are showcasing a skill that very few people have, right?
It's funny, some of them do it, some of them don't. Like there's a bunch of people who are really good high tier, you know, PUBG or Counter-Strike or COD Warzone or whatever players that have like 50 or 100 people watching them, and they're able to sustain because they live someplace that's very inexpensive and they don't have family or whatever to support. So it's tough. But
I mean, you know, a lot of it, like it sucks to say, but a lot of it comes down to right place, right time, right? Like there is definitely an aspect of luck in like, even, I mean, I can't offer any firsthand experience when, you know, he asked us like, how did we get started? Like the way I got started is like not really possible these days because like I ended up in a random IRC chat room that happened to be full of people who worked at video game magazines and websites, right? And like at some point they were like, "Hey, you want to try freelancing for us? Why don't you try writing up a sample?" Like
I wrote a letter to the Ars Technica guys, and when the site was like 4 months old, right? It was like, "Hey, you're doing a bad job with this coverage," and they were like, "You know." Yeah, and they were like, "Do you want to come do it?" This is a pretty good letter.
That was very gracious of them.
Well, I wasn't like rude. I was just like, "Hey, that's fair. Here's why I think that you're inaccurate on this and this and this and this and this."
Yeah, if you came to them with "Here's how I think this could be done better," that is actually a pretty good sales pitch. But the point I was going to make is like, I mean, first of all, that was 1996, 97 when that was going on.
Yeah.
But even then, like I just happened to luck into a place where there were people with connections that I could try to like get my foot in the door, right? Like there is definitely an element of luck to all of this stuff, unfortunately.
It's definitely also being in a position that you can afford to take those big jumps. So when, you know, I was at Ars, I had enough free time and I had a day job that was demanding, but while I was there, but didn't require a lot of time afterwards. So I was able to write news stories for them at night for nothing for 6 months before we started making any money at all.
Yeah.
When Maximum PC called and was like, "Hey, we would like you to come out and be our technical editor," I was like, "Well, okay, here's what I need to get paid, blah, 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 blah." And I was able to do that because I didn't have a lot of college debt because I had installed networks for people all through college to pay for school. And that's less possible now because school has gotten so spectacularly expensive.
Yeah.
It's really hard. So yes. I don't have a good answer. The example, my friend who's a streamer, like because he didn't have a lot of debt, he was able to say, "Okay, I'm going to eat ramen for 3 months and get going, see if this does anything." And it's worked out really well for him. So that's cool.
Yeah. By no means a certain thing though. There's no.
Yeah, that should be like if you get an opportunity, be ready to jump, but make sure you don't do something like at this point. I worked for Ars for no money for a year, right? And it was a little bit different time. If you're working, it was okay because Ars wasn't established. Nobody was making money on Ars when we started, right? We were barely paying server bills with the ads that we were running. And like our server bills were a Divinity server, a school stashed in the closet of the Divinity school at Harvard. When we had to go to full-time hosting, we got big enough that we had to pay hosting. It got incredibly expensive really fast.
Yes.
And as a result, I was willing to work for nothing because I was building something. I was getting a part of it, whatever. If somebody is coming to you from an established business where they're running ads and making money on your labor, you should not work for free ever, even when you're just starting out.
Yes.
Like that's anyway.
Yes. The only time you should do that is when you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah. Or
if you're building something that you have full control over.
Yeah, exactly.
And even then it's very tough.
Yeah.
All right. Last email.
Okay.
From Scoot on the Discord. Let's see. He describes this as an ethical question.
Oh boy.
You know how they have lab-grown meat? Like they're trying to make it so a company won't have to pay to raise and kill animals to have beef or chicken, and hopefully one day it tastes 100% like the real thing and they can sell it at scale. Well, here's the disturbing question. Would you try it?
I know. I don't want to know.
I'm starting to have second thoughts about this email.
It's too late. You've started it now. You've done this to us. This is your fault.
Here's the disturbing question. Would you try lab-grown human meat if it was made available to you, not in a survival situation?
Is this an Armie Hammer situation?
Oh, God. Follow-up questions. How would it make you feel if you enjoyed it? And what if you started craving it the way you might crave a burger or chicken fingers? Bonus follow-up question. How do you think the food industry would do with it? What kind of products do you think they'd make? I'm just going to answer no to the first part of this question and ignore the rest.
So my general food policy is that I'll try anything once, maybe twice, depending on what it is.
I would not eat synthetic human meat. I just want to put it out there. It's too much. That's creepy as hell.
So well, hold on. Let's think about this though. There are a lot of health problems that come from eating from like cannibalism, like mad cow disease is caused by prions that come from like the animals eating food that includes bits of other animals of the same species, right?
Yes.
I guess I probably would be skeezed out. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I don't think I would do it probably.
I'm not going to say it is morally wrong necessarily if it came out of a lab. Like, I mean, I guess like what are the basic moral elements to a question like this? Like, is anyone being harmed by this? I suppose not. So I guess on that level, it's okay. But like, it's just fucked up, man. No.
What's the source for the human? Like, is this a HeLa situation? You know the Henrietta Lacks story, right?
Oh.
So Henrietta Lacks is this woman who had cervical cancer and died. And her cells were reproducing uncontrollably, and basically they made a strain of a cellular tissue that they can reproduce in labs to test stuff on for generations. There's a book about this called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, I think is what it's called. And they didn't get she died of cervical cancer in the 50s, but her cells have lived on for the last 70 years because of this weird type of specific cancer growth that she had. She didn't give consent for any of this. Like her tissue remains alive 70 years after she died. And like, I think that's probably wrong. I think like, yes, it has produced a lot of good medically because this specific thing that happened to her ended up making these cells really good for testing, doing a lot of science. But was it right to do this without getting her consent? Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, like society as we have established it would agree with you, right? Because you have to opt into being an organ donor, right? Like we've already laid out that you need to give your consent for use of your body after death. So,
but I mean, is one cell of her body that then was cloned over and over and over again over 70 years like use of her body after death? I
am extremely not equipped to answer that question. But I mean, for the sake of this god awful thought experiment, I was just assuming that the human lab meat was produced ethically. So let's say somebody consented. What if you knew who you were eating?
Oh, you saying I could buy some Kevin Costner if I wanted?
I'm gonna add on to his horrific question here and say, like, what if you knew who the cell donor was? It is still more. It was already a no from me, so it is extra not. I wish I hadn't read this.
What if they just have a picture of the person's face on the front of the package?
It's funny, when I was going through these emails, when I read this email, I was just like, oh, that'll be a fun gateway to talk about lab meat, because that seems like an interesting subject. Like, I completely glossed over the human meat aspect of this email, and I was just like, oh, like lab beef and chicken is an interesting topic. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think the lab beef and chicken is fantastic, and that stuff is progressing nicely.
Yeah, like I'm not,
as I understand it,
super clear on the kind of carbon neutrality of it. Like it is,
it's way less environmentally intensive than growing a cow just to kill the cow and eat it.
Granted, like just about anything would be, right? Like,
yeah,
it would be hard to be worse than that, I guess. But like the question is, like, how much better is it? Like, is it better enough that it's worth scaling it to?
My understanding is it is a lot better.
The kind of demand that our society has for meat, or who knows?
Look, I think lab grown meat is a fantastic thing to be spending money and energy and time.
Yeah, I would have no problem trying like lab chicken or lab beef.
Yeah, I was first in line for those Impossible Burgers. And they're not lab; they're just plant based. They're plant that's structured to have a texture and consistency of meat.
Probably the interesting version of this question that is not making me to raise my hackles.
Just to be clear, you're making real weird squirmy noises and faces during this whole conversation.
This is a gross email, man. I really don't enjoy this. I think the actual like debatable version of this question is, would you eat synthetic animal that you would not eat in real life if the animal was killed, right? Like dolphin, for example, or eagle, or something like an endangered species or an intelligent species.
Would you eat panda? Would you eat synthetic panda? They look delicious. They're probably really tender.
Oh man,
probably greasy though.
They eat all that bamboo.
What about, imagine if you could get koala that wasn't just loaded with chlamydia?
I bet it's
so tasty.
I bet koala is greasy as hell.
What's the best? Like, you think there's anything out there that tastes better than pig? Like, consistently, pig is pretty much the most delicious animal.
Are you declaring pork the best of meats?
I mean, maybe. There's some fish I maybe like more than pork.
Wow, really?
Yeah, like honestly, I really miss the high mercury fish. I don't eat them anymore. The top line predators, the shark and the swordfish and all that stuff. The shark is delicious.
Wait, shark and swordfish have a lot of mercury?
Yeah, because they eat all the other fish.
Oh, well, that would make sense.
It's like shit runs uphill.
I just always assumed tuna was the worst because that's the one you always hear about.
Tuna's bad. It's another apex predator, right? Like they eat all the other smaller fish and anyway.
I guess they are pretty big.
Yeah. And they're old, so they accumulate over their lifespan. Yeah, I don't know. I look. Would you eat yourself, Brad?
Fuck this, man. We're done. I'm clicking the check mark next to this email. I can't do this anymore.
Oh, I just.
Do you think? Do you have any sense of whether we will see lab meat products available to the consumer anytime soon?
Do you think they brand the people that the meat comes from?
I'm trying to ask a legitimate question about this that might have a bearing on our everyday life.
Yes, I think we will see that in the next 10 years.
Okay, that's not as close as I was hoping, but it's not as far off as it could be.
I think there will be significant regulatory issues that come up around it that we will probably see. Like, we've already seen people who have tasted this stuff in incredibly expensive to produce quantities that are grown in labs on like collagen scaffolds made by hand and all that stuff.
Right.
The next phase is productizing it to the point that we can do it and that regulators will let it happen and all that.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, they're still in a phase where this is not even feasible at scale, right? Like, they're still trying to solve like fundamental challenges, right?
Yeah, like it's my understanding, because there was a story about this last year or the year before where they made $150,000 steak that was literally somebody like lining up collagen by hand and then growing the meat on that scaffold and then doing another layer of collagen, growing the meat on the scaffold. And like, it was the representative of millions of dollars of research and an incredible amount of time. And they were like, it tastes bad.
Oh, man.
Like, yeah. So,
that's another interesting angle on this is, would you eat it for the ethical advantages if it was a worse product, if it was a dramatically worse version of that meat?
I mean, I think at that point you're better off going to plant-based analogs.
Yeah, sure. Yes, actually, that's the right answer.
Yeah, because like for hamburger and for stuff like burgers and meatloaf and sausage, anything where there's Maillard on the outside of a like a product like those, the fake ground beef stuff is really good.
Yeah, that's true.
But you're paying a premium, and people seem to be happy to pay a premium even at someplace like Burger King to get the environment, to get the environmental impact of their burger down. It's like they say, the liberals are coming for your burgers.
That's right.
I'm just to be clear, that is a joke.
Yeah.
Not a true thing.
Yeah.
That's it for emails. If you have non-eating human meat related questions for us, we found our first verboten topic, I guess.
Yes, we will talk about just about anything else.
You can send them to techpod@content.town. Again, that's techpod@content.town. Brad, always a pleasure.
Yeah. First email episode of the year. Now we have to figure out from here, do we stretch out the episode schedule to try to get the next one of these right at the tail end of February?
We can just do an all human meat episode next month, and we'll do 2 email questions, and it'll 2 email episodes. It'll work itself out.
That's right.
As always, this is the point in the show where we let you know that if you would like to support the show, you can by using the Patreon. It's at patreon.com/techpod. You can join, hold on, let's see. I think 1,400 and hold on, active 1,445 other
of our closest friends.
Yeah, exactly. On the Patreon, for as little as $2 a month. And for that $2 a month, you get access to the fabulous TechPod Discord, which is just chock full of fascinating conversation all day, every day.
I don't know how much we want to talk about it. I don't want to out anybody, but the range of interesting professions that keep coming up on there,
it's pretty good.
Like just in the course of conversation, it's not like somebody's jumping on there going like, I'm a nuclear physicist, look at me. But like, people will allude to things, and then like somebody will ask them a question, and it's like, oh yeah, I do this.
Oh yeah, I
I
regularly break the speed of sound from work.
I won't say what was discussed the other day because it might have national security implications or something. But it's like, wow.
But yeah,
there's some very interesting people on there.
We've had our next patron spotlight will be pretty good. I think we got to figure out who we're going to ask to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to participate again, it's patreon.com/techpod. In addition to like people who have super cool jobs, like I went in and was like, hey, I have a question about this headphone cable the other day. And someone was like, oh yeah, you need to do it like this and this and this. And like, it's just, there's an incredible range of expertise, and everybody, it turns out when you take people who have interesting hobbies and interesting interests and put them together, then there's good conversations.
Yeah.
And it's nice to have a community to hang out with when we're all stuck at home, especially, I think.
And everybody's just extremely chill.
Yeah.
Even through all the recent strife, I feel like things have been,
I said it last week. We added the politics channel kind of hesitantly last year. We haven't had to moderate really anyone. I did ask people not to do crimes, threaten to do crimes, and everybody took that really well. And we haven't had any other issues since then, so that was rad. And thank everybody who participates. I think I looked the other day, there at any given time there are between 300 and 400 people who are active posters on the Discord.
Yeah.
And a whole bunch more that lurk at least once or twice a week. So that's really cool. As always, thank you to our executive producer tier patrons, the Bunny Fiend, Jacob Chappell, David Allen, and James Kamek. You all are fantastic, but also everyone else who chucks in a couple bucks a month to the TechPod Discord. We appreciate everybody. It's a thank you all so much. And we'll be back, I guess, next week with another episode of Brad and Will Made a TechPod.
Yep. See you then.
Bye.